Welcome to Beyond the Walls podcast. I'm your host, Kylie, and I want to share through personal experience and life lessons learned about personal walls that I have overcome and overcoming still, and to give you hope and tools to go beyond your walls too. Let's get started. I'm so excited to share a great guest with you guys today. I actually met her a few years back. She lives behind me, just two houses over, and our paths have just crossed in really unique, organic ways over the last few years. And she has such an amazing talents and gifts to share with you guys. And I'm so excited to be able to share her with you. So let you introduce yourself, Kristin. Welcome to the show today. Tell us a little bit about you and what the audience should know about you before we get started.
Thanks, Kylie. I'm so glad to be here. And yes, we met each other over I'm trying to remember what you brought to my house for dinner. I just moved to town about a year and a half ago, and one of the neighbors had put together just a little meal train kind of a thing, like a welcome to the neighborhood.
Yeah.
People brought over some meals just to welcome us in before we had any pots or pans or anything to cook with. And one of those neighbors was you. And we connected. I found out you live kind of catty corner from my backyard. And it's just been kind of fun to see the things that we have in common, some of the cool things that you're doing, and be able to just encourage one another and grow our businesses together. So
Yeah, it's definitely so fun. It's such a small world, isn't it? You're like,
it is.
how do we just get intertwined at just the right time? It is really cool.
It is. Yeah. So we connected back then when you brought over dinner, and then we reconnected when we learned that we both do coaching and that our hearts are for women who are trying to pull down any barriers and live out their true selves and live out their God-given calling.
Yes.
And so it kind of started that conversation. So a little background on me. I'm new to the Dallas area. I spent the last 30 years of my life living in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. I was actually born out in California. And so I've spent different times in different areas. I absolutely love it here in Dallas. It's fantastic.
Me too.
I'm married to my college sweetheart. We've been married for a little over 18 years, and we have 3 kids. So we've got a first grader, a sixth grader, and a sophomore in high school. So I span all the ages and stages. I go to 3 different schools for drop off and 3 different schools for pickup.
Oh my goodness.
And I did the math one time and realized that I'm going to spend 4,000 hours in the pickup line by the time my youngest graduates. Yeah.
Wow.
So I try to utilize that time, to be honest, for thinking and processing and coming up with good ideas.
Yeah.
Because there's an abundance of it.
Yes, for sure. I know. I think you said the other day, it takes you like 2 hours in the morning to do all of those drop-offs.
Yeah. So we wake up at 6:30, and then by the time my third drop off is complete, I get home around a little after 8:30.
Wow.
So the process of from wake up to drop off, and it's 3 drop offs in there. So there's no time for me to be getting ready or doing anything like that. It's like breakfast, lunches, drop off, breakfast, lunch, drop off, breakfast, lunch,
Yes.
drop off for
Yeah.
2 hours straight. So it's kind of a marathon. Yeah.
Do you have
We've gotten it down to a science.
Do you have morning babies? Are they at least happy, or are they like
No.
super grumpy?
No, I have to wake everyone up, including me. Groggy. It's 9:30. I'm still groggy. So if I yawn, I'm sorry. We're a night owl family. So
I am not a night owl. I'm very much a morning person. And I was a little bit worried because actually my husband is a major night owl. And he would tell stories like of his childhood, and even when he was young, like in college days, and he had a bunch of roommates, like the torturous things they would do to him to wake him up. Like he would just snooze through every alarm. So I was a little bit worried when it came to like my kids and how it was going to be. So luckily for me, they're very much more like me. So they get up pretty easily. My daughter gets herself up. She does want to be left alone. Like there's not a lot of conversation. And I don't really want to have like a whole party in the morning, but for the most part, they're pretty like get going, not a lot of trauma and kicking and screaming in the morning. So I'm super grateful for that.
Yeah, no kicking and screaming, but we're definitely pretty slow.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let's get into our amazing conversation we want to have today. Tell us a little bit about like what your coaching is and the topic that we want to talk about today to really bring some great freedom to the women listening.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found out that, so my husband and I got married when I was in college, my senior year of college.
Okay.
And a year after I graduated, I found out I was pregnant with our first daughter. I had just finished getting my degree in elementary education with a certificate to teach K through 8. I was subbing in the Chicago public schools, trying to figure out what my next step is.
Mm,
And then, surprise, I found out I was pregnant, which was such a lovely gift from God, because I don't know when I would have felt ready. So, a lot of
mm,
times, God places things into my path that I don't feel like I'm necessarily ready for.
yeah.
And it's kind of like that saying that, God equips the called. And
Mm,
that's kind of been a theme in my life. So I find out I'm pregnant with my daughter. I have my daughter. I have these plans that I'm going to work full time, bring her to the daycare. It's all going to be great. I figured it all out. And immediately after I have her, it's like, no, this is not working. This is not what I want.
mm,
So right away from the very beginning, I had to just think differently. I had to start thinking very differently about my life and how I was going to pursue my calling, but also stay intentional at home,
mm,
which was my number one calling, right?
yeah.
And I feel like I believe that all of us have callings in us inside of our home and outside of our home. And there's this kind of thought that we have to pick one or the other.
Mm,
And we don't have to pick one or the other. We have to pick both. And we have to figure out how to do both in a way that's honoring to both.
yeah.
And that is going to look different for everybody. So early on, I have my daughter. I start working from home full time, doing this remote job. That was such a gift, such a blessing. I did that for 4 years. And during that time, I had my son and felt the need to kind of get back out into the world a little bit more, make some relationships,
Yeah.
and transitioned into this fantastic role at my church that was close by. And my husband was working at the church too. And it's a large church. There were like 400 people on staff at one point.
Oh, wow.
Um, got a wonderful job there in the kids ministry, brought my kids with me, walking around with, my son in the front pack, and realize that I'm going to take this time to slowly build myself and my career
Mm,
while also being fully engaged and present in my motherhood.
yeah.
So I had a role in kids ministry for about 4 years. I transitioned into a more administrative role and then eventually transitioned into this fantastic role as the executive assistant for our campus, where that's really when my eyes started to open even more to what's possible and what was possible and what I was capable of.
Mm,
I had actually turned down some opportunities in the past where I didn't feel qualified, and I didn't feel capable. And at some point, I was tired of watching other people do things that I wanted to do.
yeah.
And I just decided to make the decision to say yes to opportunities.
Mm,
So some of them were small, like, joining a group or something like that. I did decide to run the Chicago Marathon. So that was a big
wow.
one. So I finished it. I hobbled over the finish line,
Congrats.
8 hours later with my running partners, but we
Wow.
did it. And um, that was, kind of the season of, okay, God, what do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And did the marathon, took that job as the executive assistant, and started being really uncomfortable
Mm,
on purpose,
yeah.
putting myself in situations that were just uncomfortable that I knew were stretching me and growing me. Because
Yeah.
once you stop being uncomfortable, you stop growing.
Yeah.
I spent some time there learning some great tools and techniques, and I use those now in my coaching. In fact, I used them at a workshop yesterday where we did a SWOT analysis of our small businesses
Mhm.
for local entrepreneurs. And during that time, I also got my HR certification through SHRM.
Mm,
Another season of saying yes, where I said, you know what? I think that this is a direction I can go. I
yeah.
can use this in organizations, and worked, self-studied, got that certification, and transitioned into a role at a local Chick-fil-A as their HR director for that franchise.
How fun is it to work for Chick-fil-A? Is it just
It's
as good in the corporate sense as it is their food?
it's super fun. They run a tight ship. There is a process for the process,
Okay.
and that's why it tastes so great. And after working there, I still love Chick-fil-A. I still eat there way too much. And I have even more respect because I know how hard it is and how seriously you have to take it to have it
Wow.
be what people are looking for.
Wow.
So, spent some time there as the HR director and slowly began to hone in on, okay, what is the real pinpoint way that I'm going to use my gifting and my wiring?
Mhm.
So I got my transformational coaching certification and started K&B coaching with this desire to support women who are looking for the balance between their personal home calling and their out of home calling.
Yeah.
I rebranded one of my divisions into Mom Life Balance, which is where I've got my podcast, my social media, and where I support moms through life coaching. And then I have my organizational business partnerships where I use more of those corporate skills that I learned to walk alongside businesses and support them with strategic thinking, planning, and things along those lines.
Yeah.
And during that time, I also got my certification in emotional intelligence. This was something that intrigued me because it's scientific, it is high level thinking, and it's actionable.
Hmm.
And I feel like, or I felt like, there wasn't a ton of space for moms who were doing what I was doing to stay at home and raise their kids, but also work on themselves professionally and intellectually. There
Mm,
weren't that many spaces that did that overlap, and I wanted to provide opportunities for moms to do that.
mm,
So, to be able to talk about EQ on my podcast, to be able to every time a new client comes in and works with me one on one, she gets an EQ assessment
mm,
and we start our coaching from there.
yeah.
And it's using this high level tool that you would get in the corporate world without having to be in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the language that you're using about the calling in the home and out of the home. I think
Yeah.
that resonates so much with me and like the title of my podcast and platform, like Beyond the Walls, right? Like I think
Mm,
that was so much of mine where there was just so much compartmentalizing and division as if they're like two separate worlds, either or. You can do it this way or you can do it that way. And I think as I've just progressed and learned and worked through my own mindsets, being able to find that freedom that we do have purpose. Like, and it doesn't have to even be like you have to go have a career, right? Because I think in my
right.
mind, it felt like I had to go be a CEO to do my
Right.
calling out there or just be a great mom within the home, right? Like, and so really, I think what I'm hearing more, even in that language, is like we've been given something. And I think we as humans, like, we desire connection and we desire purpose and we're called to impact each other, right? So I
Yeah.
think even just the calling, like, how are we contributing to others? And so it's like,
Right.
whatever it looks like out in the world, like, what are you doing to contribute to society? What are you doing to contribute to your family, in your home, out
Right.
of your home? Like, it's such a great and vast world of possibilities.
Yeah.
So tell us more about like the emotional intelligence. Like, what does that look like? Where's the starting point? How would somebody even know, like, where do we begin?
Yeah. Absolutely. So, emotional intelligence is, you can think of it like a wheel. There are different models of EQ. I like the EQI 2.0. And that's what I'm certified in. So it's like a wheel is what you can think of it. And it's separated into 5 different chunks
Okay.
or components, right? So there's self-perception, how I see myself,
Mm.
self-expression, which is what it's like to be on the other side of the table from me. Like,
Mm.
how do I express myself, right? Interpersonal, what are my relationships like? Decision making, and then stress management. And
Mm.
all of these pieces work together. None of them are new ideas, but the thought that you can change those things about yourself might be a new idea for some people, right?
Um,
And so within those, there are subscales or subcompetencies that build those in that create those those different components. So self-perception, how I see myself, is made um, of the self-regard, which is my confidence,
Mhm.
self-actualization, which is that go and do, and self-awareness. Do I understand even what I'm feeling and why? Right. And these are all connected to our emotions and how they're playing in our lives.
Yeah.
Because whether we want to think that we are emotional beings or not, we are. And it's fascinating when you work with a group of people, of professionals, and you have them list the traits that made their supervisor either a positive influence in their life or a negative influence in their life. And we tend to think that it's all about IQ or skill set. And there is some of that, absolutely. But what you find is that the vast majority of what made someone effective in your life is their EQ.
Mm.
And so when you think about that, even with the people that are in your life and you're working with, it's not, people probably, they don't walk away from the conversation thinking about everything you know. They think about how they made you feel
Mm.
and how they presented themselves and how they really understood themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because we've been around super smart people that have really low emotional self-awareness, and their super smarts don't fix the lacking there.
Yeah.
So when you've got this wheel, the really most important part is that it's balanced. And
Mm.
so I take my clients through, they get an assessment, they get a score in each of the subscales, each of the subcompetencies. And we walk through, okay, where are the imbalances? Where is one really high and one's really low? If you're really, really high in impulse control and you're really, really low in independence, you might be getting kind of pushed around, right? Or opposite, if you're really, really high in impulse control, or you're really low in impulse control, and you're really high in assertiveness, you might be bulldozing people in your life.
Yeah.
And so we look through, okay, where are some areas that we can improve and where are some areas that we can just make it a little more even, because the imbalance is what you're going to feel in your life. So that's kind
Yeah.
of like a big overview of EQ,
Yeah.
and what it looks like. Yeah, how to use the model.
Yeah, and I can see, I feel like a lot of that first module that you're describing, I feel like is a lot of kind of what I talk about too, is like just how do we, without the entire model, I'm new to that concept. But just how important it is that we can't like assess and put words to what we're feeling. Right. Because
Mm,
when it just stays vague and then it's overwhelming and it's all or nothing. And I think that was so much that I had to learn for myself to even be able to dream and to take responsibility for how I was feeling. Because then it's almost like it's just always mirroring what other people are feeling or other people are thinking. What do you want me to do? If you're happy with me, then I'm happy with me. Like
mm,
there's just no like personal ownership or responsibility. And for probably flipping back and forth between the bulldozing and then the doormat, right? And
yeah,
then we're just tossed back and forth and living reactive instead of being able to really be proactive about what we're going
right,
to do.
right.
How do you
And
see that kind of showing up?
yeah, I mean, so you'll see these things show up in your life. That's what I was just going to say, is you'll see the imbalances right away. So what the model does is it either shows blind spots where maybe you're not noticing the imbalances, or if you are seeing them, it shows you what needs to change.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so if you feel like you're just kind of going with everyone's whim all the time, and you're not really fulfilling or following through on what is right or you should do, you're probably really high in that empathy, social responsibility, and you're really low potentially in the self-regard, that confidence, that independence, that assertiveness. And so while it's great that you're high in social responsibility and empathy, it can be a weakness if it's not balanced correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that it's really easy for us to pin each other against each other and almost like make it wrong, right? Like,
Mhm.
but each of those aspects that we have, I think if we're willing to just accept and consider that there is a strength and a weakness to everyone, right? And if
Yeah.
we're only giving into our weakness and it causes damage, like, so how can we how can we have empathy in a healthy way, balanced
Yeah.
out? with the opposite and not be giving in to one or the other. I'm curious, when you were sharing in the beginning, it sounds like, well, EQ probably just really made sense. Like it sounds like you already had a lot of that before you came across the actual like scientific data around it.
Mhm.
At least is what I heard in your story, right? Like
Yeah.
there was just like, how did you learn it somewhere, or do you feel like were you just kind of how you were naturally wired to have been so intentional about the, like, in the home, out of the home calling? Like, where did that come from
Yeah.
for you?
Well, I've always wanted to be a mom, and I've always felt it very deeply that that was the desire for me to have kids. And so much so that I actually named my first daughter when I was in middle school.
And you
There
stuck
was
with
this,
it?
yeah, uh-huh,
Wow.
yeah. So there was a song by a group called Bread that my mom used to listen to. It's a 70s band, and they have a song called Aubrey.
Mm,
And I always wanted to name my daughter, have a daughter and name her Aubrey. And so when it was kind of funny because I got pregnant with her. We didn't know if that she was a girl. The doctors were 80% sure she was a girl, which
oh,
is
wow.
not really helpful because
No.
then I didn't wash any of her pink clothes or anything because I thought if she comes out and they were wrong because they couldn't see it in the ultrasound, then I've got
Yeah.
all this pink clothes and bedding. So it was almost worse than just not knowing,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah.
My son, our second born, he was obviously a boy in the ultrasound, so that made it really easy. And then our third, she's a girl, and I decided, you know what? There aren't a whole lot of surprises in life. So
Mm,
much to my husband's dismay, I said, let's not find out. Let's be
yeah.
surprised.
Oh my goodness.
So, and I had boy clothes and girl clothes, and she wore a lot of yellow for a couple weeks.
That works perfectly. Yeah, I felt that way with we found out with both of our kids, and they were like, I feel like we probably they gave me 100% both times, but I think especially with my daughter, I was like, I'm not gonna entirely believe it because I felt like I what I wouldn't want is to deliver my baby and then be hint like have any sense of disappointment. Right,
Hmm.
like, shock of, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's not what I expected," right? So there
Yeah.
was always, like, in the back of my mind, I was like, they could be wrong, I'm not gonna like, I'll believe it when I see it."
Right.
So it's just
Exactly.
that level. Well, and I asked you why I was so surprised that you stuck with the name because that was my mom's story. She thought she was always gonna have I'll have to ask her now, I'm blanking on it, but it might have been Aubrey or it was Audrey. It was some name that she always had as a whole child, like, she'd name her dolls the name, whatever.
Yeah.
And then by the time I was gonna be born, she was like, "I'm so sick of that name, I gotta have a different name." And so then I got a completely different name, so
That's too funny. Well, and what's funny is I had actually kind of forgotten about it because it had been so long.
Yeah.
And one of my very best friends that I had been friends with back all through my childhood and teen years, she was like, "Kristin, no, you have to. What are you doing? Like, of course you're going to name her Aubrey. That was your
That's
decision when
been
you were like
the name.
12 years old."
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty funny.
I
Yeah.
love it, that's really cute. Okay, so back to where you were. So you always really wanted to be a mom. Did you always also envision yourself having a career? Like, what was your drive to go have a career then? Like, go to become
Yeah.
a teacher kinda thing?
Yeah. So my mom was a quasi stay-at-home mom. She was a stay-at-home mom, but she would work little stints doing other things. Like she was a
Okay.
waitress for a while. She worked in retail for a while. She always did kind of like supplementary jobs.
Yeah,
But in general, yes, I would consider her a stay-at-home mom.
yeah,
And so that was always a value to me of the value of knowing that my mom was home if I was sick, or, needed I forgot something. Just knowing that there was somebody that had my back that was available. So
yeah,
that availability was always really important to me.
yeah,
So I knew that that was an important part, but then so we live in a world that tells us we're supposed to work,
yeah,
right? As women, that has built this whole story around that we're supposed to, kick butt and take names and girl power and the future is female and
yeah,
all of these things. And so I think for a while it was a bit confusing to me of, okay, I want to do this thing. I want to stay home with my kids, but it's considered taboo or weak or just kind of a
mhm,
waste at this point. But I don't want to leave them for 8 hours a day at daycare. That's just
yeah,
not going to be satisfying for me at all.
yeah,
So I almost feel like it's taboo to say that. And so I'm careful with how I say it because not everyone has the choice
Yeah.
to be home and be flexible. And I've been very blessed that I have a husband that's, afforded that for me based on his work. We've
Yeah.
been afforded that. But um, I've also always wanted more and wanted to do more. And so I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about this idea of working moms and the history of it. And so if you kind of look at society, up until the Industrial Revolution, really, women were home with their kids.
Mm.
Um, they were home and they were taking care of their homes and they didn't have modern conveniences. So
Yeah.
they were canning food and they were cleaning everything by hand,
Yeah.
including the dishes, including the laundry, all the things, right?
Yeah.
And then you have the Industrial Revolution and the war, and women had to go to work, right? Because the men were gone. So the women go to work, and then it shifted back to, okay, well, now the women are home. We have all of these conveniences. So now the women just stay home and kind of only contribute in certain ways, but they don't have to contribute in other ways.
Yeah.
It's almost like we've gotten confused on what is the role of a wife
Yeah.
and a mom and a woman at home.
Yeah.
Because then we swung so far. It's like we have these huge swings. You
Yeah.
work really hard, and then you don't have to do anything outside of the home, and there's all these modern conveniences. And now we're back to this. They did this big swing in the 80s of no, women are supposed to be at work. They're not supposed to be at home. They're supposed to be, CEOs, all these things. And I think a lot of women were miserable.
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, I went back to work with my daughter down the hall from me for 3 months and I was miserable.
Mm.
I was just miserable. And I just said, I am not doing this anymore. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Again, everyone is different. This is not a judgmental statement.
Yeah.
Just for me and what I felt for my calling, that was not it.
Yeah.
So we're set up in this strange spot where we're expected to work, but a lot of us don't really, we want to be home. And then looking back, I started to think, okay, what's the history of women working? And you were talking, I was going to say this earlier, but this is the right time. You were talking about, beyond the walls
Mhm.
and having these like categories in your life, right?
Yeah.
And when you think about women working up until the early 1900s, people had farms, they
Yeah.
had livestock, and they were making their own clothes and fixing their own clothes and doing
Yeah.
all these things. So that was what women did. They were busy from the moment they woke up until the moment they went to bed, working for their family.
Yeah.
And the lines were blurred because I would say there wasn't a line. Your
Yeah.
home was your job because there was a lot to do.
Yeah.
And it's different now. So what does that look like?
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
I think that's where so many moms now and so many women are starting their own businesses or, working for corporations and organizations that allow them the flexibility
Yeah.
because they don't want these compartmentalized lives,
Yeah.
you
Well, and
know?
it's tricky in like how because I think you're totally right. And even just the language and the way that we view it, right? And then there's so much social pressure, the spoken and the unspoken. Like we're almost
Mhm.
just like in this wave and we're just being pushed along and life is happening to us, for the
Yeah.
most part. And we're doing our very best to be in charge of our lives while like so much of life is being done to us.
Yeah.
And how do we even reframe like why are we doing the things that we're doing? Which I think when I was hearing in your emotional intelligence thing, it's almost like just this if you don't have your own identity and confidence and security about who you are,
Yeah.
and that you do get to have a say in your life. Because even if you have to work, let's say you weren't in a position and you had to actually work full time and you had to work a job that you hated, right? Because we also
Mhm.
like, I feel like as society, we have to also work a job we love, right? Like,
Right.
and it
Has to be
better
perfect,
be,
right? Yeah.
yeah, like the best of the best. And it's got to feel good and bring you money and bring you joy and be, so unrealistic of expectations.
Right.
And so then even if you have to do those things, like I think being able to take that time to be intentional to like re-choose that. And I think that was so much where I was like, I had to re-choose being a stay-at-home mom. Like I had to
Yeah.
re-choose and take some of that responsibility back.
Right.
And then I had choices, I had options, which I think that's what I hear in your story of like, okay, this is the path I thought I was going to go around. So whether you were, you know, socially swept into it, right, for whatever
Right.
reasons, all of a sudden you found yourself and you were aware enough to know this is miserable. I don't like
Right.
it. Is there another way?
Yeah.
And then just start from there to just be open-minded to what else is possible.
Right. Yeah, and it's having that grounding, it's having that self-regard and, as women especially, uh, if we don't have that confidence piece, in general, if you don't have the confidence piece, but I find that a lot of times women struggle with that,
Mm,
maybe more than men. If you don't have that confidence piece locked in, or
yeah,
at least moving in the right direction, it's really hard to work on the rest of the things in your
yeah,
EQ. It's really hard to work on your optimism and your stress tolerance. If
yeah,
you don't believe in yourself and have a clear understanding of who you are and where you're going, or at least where you want to go,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, they say that women are shaped from the outside before 40 and they're shaped from the inside after 40.
Hmm.
And so I turned 40 actually next week. And
Yes.
what's been interesting is that I feel like kind of my transition into that happened a little bit early, but that wouldn't surprise me because most of my transitions in life have
Mhm.
happened early.
Yeah,
And I mean, when I think back, I was about 35 when I started doing all of these things.
yeah,
I was 25 when I said, okay, no, this is not the direction I want to go.
yeah,
But when I was 35, I really decided, okay, this is the direction I want to go.
yeah,
That's very different.
yeah,
You know, I
yeah,
think that I spent about 10 years playing defense and then finally got to the point where I said, okay, I get to choose and I get to make some decisions. And if I see a door that's creaking open, I'm
yeah.
going to open it up and see what's on the other side.
That's so cool. Yeah, I turned 40 in September.
Oh, awesome.
So, kind of feeling that same way, but I would say, yeah, probably like 10 years ago, I think is really like aha moment to even just start considering, right?
Yeah.
Like, and it really just does. It's that awareness to the recognition between survival and thriving, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we just trying to, survive through life and it's being done to us into that transition of really owning it and making those decisions. And it might mean, I think that's where I always feel too. I don't want people to feel so daunted that they have to like change their entire life. Felt so overwhelming in those beginning stages to feel like, well, if this isn't working, then none of my life is working. I have to change everything and be a completely different person.
Mm-mm. Mhm.
And yeah, like it's just you got to dial it way back and just allow just the openness, the awareness to start just recognizing it and seeing it, taking stock, like what even is happening. Otherwise, then we're just reacting. And I think then there's secondary wounds that I think happen in that when, if
Mhm.
we think about it, because I was thinking when you're describing it, like with the 40, it's almost like we're all having our own midlife crisis, but I don't know that anybody ever talks about women having midlife crisis, like, when it's
Mhm.
usually all the men and then they, ditch their wives and go get the younger girl and get the car and all the things, right? And I'm like, maybe that was kind of what I was fearing, that it needed to look like I had to get rid of everything. And I was like, I don't
Mm.
wanna stop being married. I don't wanna stop being a mom.
Yeah.
Like, I don't wanna go back to college and go be a CEO of something.
Right.
But what else is there? Like, there's something else between and before this major drastic.
Yeah.
How do we just work on the inside and let it
Yeah.
be blossom into something amazing?
Yeah. I think that if we're not clear on our why, then we're going to think that we need to change everything. And going back to what's the why? What am I'm feeling discontent
Yeah.
or I'm feeling like there's more
Yeah.
or something's off and starting to dig a little bit deeper and saying, well, I think I want to work outside of the home a little bit, or I think I want to start my own company, or I think I want to be home with my kids
Yeah.
full time. And understanding the why is going to point you into the right direction of how
Yeah.
you're going to do that and
Yeah.
how you're going to solve that issue.
Yeah. I wonder, what do you remember of that time? And either hearing or how much were you willing to share with others, like to bring them into that journey? Because I'm sure that I assume you had a lot of supportive responses.
Yeah.
A lot of women will not have supportive responses. So what was your journey? Did you have
Yeah.
any naysayers? And how did you kind of like navigate, like, no, this is really something I'm going to keep sticking through. And it doesn't really matter what other people say, but you can still do it with people.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I had just finished 4 years, and I actually had to take an extra semester because I transitioned from marketing into education
Mm,
halfway through my time at my college.
okay.
And because honestly, I was already starting to have these thoughts. I had entered into the school of business to get into marketing,
Mm,
met my husband, fell in love with him, and thought, I want to have a family with him. And this is not going to support me the way that I want to raise my family. This is
mm,
not going to work. So that's actually a large part of why I transitioned into elementary ed. I felt like you could raise your kids and have a good balance working in the school system because you could bring them with. And I had watched other people do it successfully.
yeah.
I didn't fully understand what was going on behind the scenes, but
Mm,
it seemed very successful to them. And I do think that again, I think there are ways that you can do so many things
yeah.
successfully.
Yeah.
So for me, that was a large reason why I switched. I had just graduated. My parents had put me through college for the most part. I had minimal student loan debt, some, but not a ton compared to what some people have. And decided I'm not going to use this degree,
Mm,
right? I did end up using it with my job at the church, working in the kids ministry,
yeah.
you know, and there are so many things that I learned from it that I've used in my life. But at the time, it felt like that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And I did hear from some people like, wow, what a waste. What a waste of
Mm,
your degree. What a waste of money.
yeah.
And I think I had to just dig deep and say, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter
Yeah. Yeah.
what you're thinking about it, or even if it's true. For me, this is what's right, and I'm going to continue down this path.
Yeah. Well, and I can just imagine like there's so many women that have those thoughts, right? Like we have those thoughts. That would be such a waste. This would
Hmm.
be so irrational. It doesn't make any sense. So then we just settle into resigning, right? Like just surrendering our life. Then, like, we have to do this. We're now sentenced to this
Hmm.
death march
Yeah.
just so it's not a waste.
Right.
And then we're miserable, right? Like,
Right.
how can it possibly look a different way than what it looks like to other people? And again, that speaks to the whole like, are you responsible for my life or am I responsible for my life? Like, who gets to decide if it's a waste? And also, can other people be free to call it a waste and it not be a waste to you? Like, but that takes a lot of grit
Hmm.
and like some confidence. Like, if you don't have any security or confidence to withstand that kind of pressure or to withstand that judgment, because it
Yeah.
feels like judgment, and depending on who it comes from and how close they are to you and how serious they feel about it,
Yeah.
how much of a higher pressure it's going to feel. How did your husband respond to it? Like, on the journey, like, have you had to do a lot of, I don't know if convincing is the right word or just a lot of conversations? Like, how did that work with him to be on this journey with you?
Well, it's gone through different seasons. So when I first made the decision, I remember him having a conversation. You can do this while she's little. When she goes back to school full time, you can go back to work full time. And
Yeah.
in my head, I'm like nodding my head, like, yeah, absolutely. In my head, I'm thinking, there's no way that's going to happen. I'm not doing that. And we're having more kids than one. So I don't know what dream world you're in,
Yeah.
but okay. Yeah, sweetie. So that was kind of the first conversation. And then we had our son, and it was the same conversation again. Well, when Trent is in school full time. You can go back to school full time.
Yeah.
And then by that point, I was kind of like, okay, we'll see. We'll see
Yeah.
what happens with that. Let's just
Mm.
take it day by day
Yeah.
and let's keep moving down the path. And I wasn't being manipulative or anything with my husband. He would laugh if he heard this because I think he always knew my heart and the path was so clear for us.
Yeah.
And I had tried to get a job in teaching that year in between. Now it was in inner city schools and I ran up into some really weird barriers that I didn't
Mm.
expect for getting jobs. And there were things about it, the whole industry that I didn't like. So he was totally supportive of what I was doing. And I was bringing in an income and I
Yeah.
was working hard and I was building my resume and I wasn't paying a dime for childcare.
Yeah.
And so much of there is such a conundrum
Yeah.
that women get in that you have to make
Yeah.
quite a bit of money to make it worth it.
Yeah. Unless
Like,
it's just a break even.
yeah,
Yeah.
you really do. You really have to make quite a bit of money to
Yeah.
make it worth the sacrifice for you and your family.
Yeah.
By that point, after I had my son and I got, plugged in at the church, then I could kind of see my career growing, my earnings potential growing, and the direction going where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And so the question was, how did this work out with my husband? The same way that I think that it worked out for me was taking it day by day, seeing what made sense, keeping tabs on, okay, how's his career going? What's making sense here? Is this
Yeah.
making sense? And what do I need to do to offset any of our needs there? And how can I build something where I can be happy and fulfilled and successful in all the ways
Yeah.
into the rest of my life?
Yeah.
And that's what eventually led me to starting my own business
Yeah.
because the earnings are unlimited,
Yeah.
the reach is unlimited, and you can really dig in and follow your calling.
Yeah. It sounds like along that whole journey, you are willing to just like pace yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
let these thoughts simmer, right? Like they
Mhm.
weren't overnight changes. And you also didn't like lock into this is how it has to look, right? There was
Mhm.
some openness that's like, here's kind of what I would like my life to look like. I don't know how that's going to work out, but
Mhm.
let's just wait and see. Let's just
Mhm.
keep sprinkling those seeds, having conversations. You also were open and flexible to kind of whatever came your way. And it sounds like, and it just grew and grew and grew, right? Like when you were sharing more about then those real opportunities after you were done working with the church, like what could it look like now and how can we dream?
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite passages is Ephesians 3:20 and it says that God is able to do immeasurably more than you can think or imagine. And I think for me, like I was again like so compartmentalized, like it just so restricted and feeling like it has to look like this or it can't look like this or I'm
Yeah.
stuck here forever. How do I just buckle down and find joy in this miserable circumstance? And instead, like that scripture says to me that the very best thing that I think it could be, the way I think it's supposed to work out, God has an even better plan. And I
Mhm.
can't even imagine it. So that means let go. I it, I can't think of it. So
Yeah.
it's not going to look anything like the way I think it's supposed to look.
Right.
And so how do we just then intentionally take that step back to pause, to reflect, to be willing to hope, to dream, and to just be open to moving in a direction that's going to be honest with ourselves, be honest with our circumstances, bring the people along the journey, right? Because you also
Yeah.
didn't burn bridges in your marriage the way you went. Like you didn't burn
Right.
bridges with the people around you or your children or make any of them wrong.
Mm-mm.
Like that takes a lot of emotional intelligence, I would imagine, right? Like just
Yeah.
that security of really what you're even saying, like the step one of just that, what did you call the phase? Self regard, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
amazing.
continuing to build that, keeping that on the forefront and always remembering the why behind
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. What would
Yeah.
be one nugget that you would leave my audience with of like if they're feeling stuck or just to kind of leave them with some hope and a practical tool?
Yeah, absolutely. So, The first thing I would say is to dream big, to
Mm,
realize that, it's cliche, but life is short and you're given an opportunity to not only an opportunity, but I believe a responsibility to use your gifting
yeah.
in the world. And so, where do you feel called? Where are you feeling gravitated toward right now?
Yeah.
And understanding why you're feeling that way and giving yourself the permission to to dream about it a little bit.
Yeah.
Start getting your mind in that direction and think what's possible for you in your future. Cuz so often we put up these roadblocks in our own minds of, well, I couldn't do that because this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know she does that, but I can't do that because she's this and this and I'm not.
Yeah.
We put up all these, we say no to all these opportunities before they even get a chance to present themselves to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be my first, and my encouragement would be to give yourself a chance to dream big
Um,
because you have the option to do that.
yeah.
And it's your choice if you want to do that or not. And no
Yeah.
one can make you do that.
Yeah. And you don't have
And
to follow
then
through, right? Like, even if you dream on it, you could change your mind. Like, you don't
absolutely.
pursue it all the way down. Like, you're not committed. Cause I think that was part of my hang up where I was like, oh, I can't even, cause then I have to do and I have to follow through and I'm locking myself in. You don't have to.
No, you don't. And the right doors, if you're being responsible with what you're given, the right doors will continue to open for you,
Mm, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I always encourage my clients to spend time in reflection.
Mm,
And a great way to do that is to reflect right in the moment. So if you see an opportunity that you say no to, take note of that and think about what's surrounding that. Why did you say
yeah.
no? What are you feeling right now? What do you wish what have to change for you to say yes to it?
Yeah.
It's a simple start to a mindset shift for you of saying yes to opportunities instead of shutting them down.
Yeah. I love that. Well, anything else
Yeah.
you want to share with us? It's been such a great conversation getting to know you more. And it is a big conversation, really, of just how do we as women process what our roles are, what we're going to do with our time, what is our
Yeah.
gifts, and to use them in the home and out of the home.
Yeah.
So much great things to think about.
I mean, I guess the final thought is if you're a mom, because I speak to a lot of moms, if you are a mom, thinking about how you would encourage your kids to answer these questions
Mm,
or face the challenges. We so often expect slash hope our kids follow their calling and pursue it wholeheartedly.
yeah.
And are we modeling that?
Mm, I
I
love
think
that.
that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. I love that. Well, Kristen, if people want to follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on at my website is kmbcoaching.com,
Okay.
where they can find all the different ways that I support not only women, but also organizations and speak to your group. And you can also follow me on social media. Facebook, you can follow me at Mom Life Balance. And on Instagram, it's momlife_balance.
Awesome. And I'll put that information on the show notes as well for you guys if you want to go back and find it more. Kristen, thank you so much for your time and just your commitment to following your path and leading by example. We really learned a lot from you today.
Thanks, Kylie.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you would like more information about opportunities for coaching or more help outside of the podcast, you can follow us at beyondthewalls.podcast on Instagram or check out our website, beyondthewallspodcast.com. Until next time, bye.